I see you. Your eyes. Your hands. Your chips. Everything. So I don't need to see your cards. We play at fulltailpoker.com.
This is Diego Cortez.
Adam Schoenfeld.
Welcome to the Scoop. Brought to you by Full Tilt Poker.
Don't touch me.
Today we actually do have a special.
This is a
show.
very special episode of the Scoop, like a very special Facts of Life you've seen.
We've actually, for the first time, brought in a non-poker player, non-professional poker player.
Right.
But Randy Couture is so big, and he's our hero.
Greatest champion in MMA history.
Greatest champion in MMA history. One of the great athletes in the world. 46 years old and still at the top of the game. And someone who's been instrumental to the growth of mixed martial arts. And the guy who's actually now using poker to promote some of his good causes. So we couldn't pass that up, and here we go. One thing is, the last couple of years, mixed martial arts and poker have kind of paralleled each other in the sense that they've started making it into the mainstream, and there are sponsors and TV. Mm-hmm. And in poker, there's been a negative effect in that people now play up to the cameras, and it used to be very calm, but now people win a pot and they're screaming and doing dances.
Right.
And watching UFC 100 at the end of the fight, Brock Lesnar won, and he had all these theatrics, and
Absolutely
then got
lost
in Frank
his
Mir's
mind,
face.
yeah.
I mean, is that just good because it promotes the sport and people are interested, or is that now
Actually, I
dignity
don't
of it?
think it's good. I'm not a fan of it. I think it goes against what we spent a lot of time building in not only the camaraderie amongst the athletes, but the impression that we're real martial artists. That
Right.
there's some, spirit in what we do, and I think it goes against that. And
You don't want people confusing it with WWE.
No,
or
absolutely
anything like
not.
that.
Do you think that he was in that mindset where he's a marketer and he likes playing the bad guy and he got a little carried away, or?
it's honestly hard for me to say. I hope that he doesn't continue to kind of foster that persona. And obviously, that's what he did in the WWE for a
Right.
long time. But he was a real athlete before that.
Right.
And that stuff didn't fly in collegiate wrestling and
Right.
his
Right.
background. And so I'm hoping that he stays more true to that and stays away from the pro wrestling antics, because I think they damage our sport. They damage the reputation of us as mixed martial artists.
We don't like that in poker either, like, the old
The
school
Phil
guys.
Hellmuth and the
I mean,
guys that rave
it's
and
I mean,
Yeah.
even Phil, it's like, he's had that image for a long time, but it's like a young guy will win a pot and just like do a dance, the robot. It's like there should be a certain dignity, especially when the competition is over. Like you face the other guy in the arena, and now there's no point in rubbing it in. That's what we feel.
I mean, that's the one thing poker always had, which is we're competing against each other, but we're all in there willing to put our money at stake and battle each other, and you should have respect just for that, for your opponent, just based on that.
Absolutely. Your opponent forces you to learn things, practice, do things that you wouldn't have otherwise done if you didn't face that guy, and for that I have to give him respect. And I think there's a camaraderie amongst us. We're all trying to build this sport and get people to understand us, that we're not crazy, that we're not thugs, we're not idiots that just go beat each other up or beat people up.
Right, MMA had an image problem, and it still, in some places, has that problem where government officials are against mixed martial arts. They won't allow it in certain states, which I think it's a mockery, because this is like a super skillful battle of highly trained athletes. Do you see progress in that, though?
Oh, we've a ton of progress, and it was kind of interesting having just had the first show in Germany and going, because I lived in Germany, speak a little German, went to the press conference. I was like, man, I haven't answered these kinds of questions in probably 8 or 9 years. It's like going back in time, and
Because people
it's so brutal, and just all the things that people's first impression of
Right.
our sport is. And I think there's some parallels between poker. I mean, a lot of people think of gambling and
They
poker
think it's
as
degenerate gambling and luck and like a lottery.
and I think our first poker event, I got a little private lesson with Jamie Gold, who was our host for that event, and I was overwhelmed at the numbers and all the things that he dumped on me, and I was like, no, which one was the big blind again? I was like,
right.
I mean, he just totally blew my mind, and I was like, I can't believe there's this much going into this game, and now I get it. I'm trying to figure that stuff out as I watch it on TV. I was like, why is this on ESPN? Is this a sport?
Right.
You know?
It's not a sport.
But now I see that there's a whole
But it's a
lot more going
competition.
on
It's a
there
super
than-
high level competition.
than people realize, and I think there's a similar parallel with our sport too. There's a lot more tactics and technique and things going on in the mixed martial arts fight.
And the public's getting educated about it. I mean, MMA's done a good job in the sense that people really didn't even understand what the techniques were, and now I think there's such an appreciation for all the different skills and how there's also the strategy of having multiple skills and which one you're going to employ and so forth.
Well, when you first start in poker, poker's gotten a lot harder in the last 5 years, certainly, because it's gotten a lot of attention. So, people come in and they're smarter and they study it and they're better. Have you seen that in mixed martial arts? From when you started, the skill level is probably exponentially higher, right?
Absolutely. The level of athlete has gone way up. Guys are way more specialized. They're cross-training and everything. Guys don't come in with just one background and all this other stuff. Everybody's pretty well-rounded. It's become much more competitive. It's a lot more difficult.
Seems like one thing is that originally it was like tough guys, and now these guys have been NCAA champions or trained for years and competed internationally in different disciplines. It's a different level of
world class athlete.
Just a guy
sure.
who's a tough guy, bar fighter, is not going to compete.
Yeah, the
any
Tank
longer.
Abbott's.
Right.
I think we saw how long he lasted when he tried to make his comeback. I mean, that type of fighter is just not going to be very successful anymore. It's become a profession. These guys train, day in, day out. You become well-rounded. You learn all the skills you need to. Nobody's walking in and saying karate's the best, and I'm going to prove it, because there's so many holes in that game alone that they're going to get pointed out to you in a hurry.
Even someone who was an NCAA wrestling champion like yourself, you couldn't just rely on wrestling.
No.
You can't just have one discipline because they'll expose you. Is that right?
Absolutely. Yeah. The striker who's done his homework and learned how to sprawl and keep a fight in a standing position is now going to point out my glaring weakness to me, and that's not going to be much fun.
Right. How did you adjust to the striking? Because you were a wrestler for a long, long time, and a wrestling coach, and international Olympic level wrestler. How did you adjust to getting hit in the face all of a sudden?
It was definitely an adjustment. My first trainers were great guys, and they stuffed me in a corner, so I had nowhere to go, and just started throwing punches at my head. and eventually you get over your natural instinct
you have to open your
turn
eyes.
away and close your eyes, and you learn to tuck your chin and protect your head, and you start using your hands and moving your head, and pretty soon it becomes commonplace.
So
you get used to it.
You just learn the hard
You
way.
have to force yourself to do it. There's so many things in fighting that go against your natural instinct that you have to train yourself through that.
My instinct is always to flee, and that goes for poker,
that's a
combat sports.
That's a good instinct, though, because
Certainly outside of the cage,
in real life,
that's the absolute right thing to do.
Yeah.
Do you get the situation where when you're out in public, guys in bars or tough guys just they think they can take you on, or they just want to make a name
that's
for
a
themselves?
rarity. Guys make comments and then I smile, laugh it off, and then they laugh, and so.
Because Adam was making a lot of comments before you came in, but I would characterize it disrespectful. But
so I've never really found myself in that situation. I have heard stories of other fighters that have found themselves in those situations, and
That's a no-win situation for
I
a
think there's
professional
usually always
fighter.
alcohol involved, and
Right,
I don't hang out in those types of environments terribly often either. So, I think it all kind of comes from you. What kind of energy are you putting out there? I got nothing to prove to anybody. I love what I do, have a blast, and I don't need to drag that around with me everywhere I go. So,
a lot of that also probably comes from the persona that you have, which is very serious, very professional. People respect you, and they're not looking to challenge you the way they might someone who is more cartoonish in the way that they present themselves.
yeah, some of the personas, a guy like Tito, who's brash and makes a lot of comments, if somebody in that setting maybe challenged him, that's probably because of that persona he set up. It's not something he's just going to let go.
Right, right. That could be a problem.
Therefore, immediately you have the potential for a conflict there, and he's actually one of the guys I've heard stories about. But you know, and if he were sitting here, he's a very nice guy. I like Tito, but he kind of created this image that then he has to live up to, and I think that's a problem. And you know, we talked about Brock. I mean, now what's Brock going to do? Is he going to have to do that every single time he goes out there? People are going to expect that.
You know, you mentioned Phil Hellmuth, and I often say that about Phil. He's sort of a victim of his own image, and now he feels he has to live up to it. And then other people challenge him, and so now does he want to back down? Like, that's not good either.
Right.
It's a vicious circle because once you develop a certain image, and now in poker it's broadcast on television, people are going to treat you as if that's who you are, and you can't blame anyone but yourself. I mean, you created that environment.
You create a monster that you then have to deal with and live up to.
One of the things in poker that we talk about now is that a lot of the champions are these young kids. Like, they'll be 21, 22, and you are much older than the average MMA fighter. Do you let yourself think about that? Because I think if you think about that too much, like, it becomes a hurdle.
Yeah, I don't. It doesn't really matter to me. I think you set particular benchmarks or standards in your training and your practice environment with the guys you're used to sparring with, and in competition, and you focus on the technical aspect of what you do. The age doesn't, that doesn't really matter. I can't, I have to be in tune and physically pay attention to my body, and certainly that's changed a little bit as I've gotten older, but for the most part I've held up very well. I'm still getting better as a fighter. I'm learning new skills. I'm just as explosive and just as dynamic as I ever was, and I think there's something for the maturity factor. You let a lot of things go. I don't buy into a lot of crap that I probably would have bought into when I was younger.
Well, one of your strengths that we see when we watch you is that you seem super calm, and that works in poker too. Like, if you can remain calm and not, we call it going on tilt, that's a huge advantage. Do you find patience and calmness?
Yeah, oh, absolutely. In our sport, I think that's the name of the game. And everybody's wired different, so they deal with the adversity of competition a little bit differently. But I think the more focused, centered, and calm and relaxed that you can be, the more you're going to allow the training that you've done to prepare for that competition to come out.
Sorry, Dave, go ahead.
Well, I was saying one parallel is that in poker there are a lot of different styles that can succeed. I mean, there are very aggressive players, more passive players, guys who are trapping, guys who are playing a lot of hands or aren't. And in mixed martial arts, of course, there are different techniques now that have come into play. There's a perception in poker that certain guys just play a certain way, but the reality is the really good players adapt to everyone else and find other people's weaknesses. For you, is it more a matter of imposing your style or your will on someone, or are you looking for weaknesses that you can exploit when you face someone?
Definitely looking for weaknesses, areas of the fight that you can kind of put a guy in where he's are not to his advantage, and you want to try and keep him in those areas as much as possible. But at the same time, you can get too carried away with that. You still have to go where you're strongest in a fight too, and where you feel most comfortable. And so I think there's a balance of the two. You don't want to be too skewed one way or the other. You need to adapt. Definitely study tape and try to ferret out where guys like to be and where they don't like to be, what I need to watch out for technically, and where I know I'm safe, and then you kind of mentally come up with a game plan and an image of how your style and you as a fighter fits into that fight.
I mean, you've been light heavyweight champion and heavyweight champion. You're not a big heavyweight by any means. We just saw a few weeks ago Lyoto Machida winning the light heavyweight championship. And what was fascinating, and we watched it and talked about it afterwards, is how he presents kind of a whole different style, very unusual.
Unique.
And he's very unique right now. And he really dictates his own style. I mean, he makes people fight his way, it seems like. I mean, potentially you could fight him down the road. It would be a fascinating matchup. I mean, what sort of tactics would you use against someone who is just going to stand there and say, I'm fighting karate style and come and get me?
I'm very intrigued by him and his style and what he's done. He's so patient. He doesn't care what the crowd's saying or what
that's the thing.
I mean, he's going to fight the way he's going to fight, and he doesn't give a rip. And he's been very successful at it. I've enjoyed watching him. I think he seems like a tremendous guy. I've not spent a bunch of time with him yet, so I don't know. But he seems like a very, very genuine, nice guy, and he's got a very unique fighting style, which intrigues me. That would be a fight I would be very interested in.
It would be fascinating just to see how you approach it philosophically, just because you can either fight his fight, or you can try to figure out a way to get him away from his own fight, but no one's been able to do that.
Right. Nobody has been able to do that. I think at some level you have to meet a guy and at least step on to his turf a little bit to engage him, to get him, to lead him away. And it'd be interesting to see what that would take. Obviously, I know I would have to rely heavily on my wrestling background, set him up, cut him off. He uses a lot of motion.
He makes guys miss. He
does.
He seems like he's hitting them 5 times, and then they'll swing and miss once, and then he hits them with another 5 times.
One thing that he seems to do very well is that he keeps people at a distance. He keeps them at the distance that he wants.
Yep.
And obviously the challenge would be either cutting down that distance or doing something else so that that's not an issue.
Yeah, like many of the fights I end up in, I had to find a way to get my hands on him.
Right.
And that's been a challenge for everybody so far.
I mean, he makes his opponents pay when they try to close the distance. So
very
that's
elusive.
Right.
He's tremendous angles and footwork. Very, very interesting posture when he fights, and he poses some very interesting problems.
Now you've got 2 major events coming up. August 22nd, you have a charity poker tournament to raise money for an important cause. And August 29th, you've got a big MMA fight, UFC 102.
Yeah.
So if you have to pick between the 2, which one you'd win? I'm assuming you've already won a lot of UFC fights. The poker would be the one to round out your resume.
Yeah, well, I may round out my resume, but I'm a little more focused on the fight, the 29th, for sure.
So we'll just say that that's August 22nd at the Golden Nugget, Operation All In, which benefits the GI Foundation, which is affiliated with Extreme Couture GI Foundation, which is one of your causes. You want to tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, well, I came out of, first of all, having worn the uniform for 6 years in the Army, and then now in a completely different stage of my life, get a chance to rub elbows with a lot of the soldiers, and been to Iraq, been to the hospitals, and you can't meet those guys and not be touched by the sacrifices that they've made, especially the guys that have been wounded, and so we kind of wanted to find a way to help some of these guys get themselves back on track, support their families, get prosthetics or the things that they need,
or just pay the bills.
If that's the case.
They can't work.
That's where the GI Foundation came out of. It's very small. My staff of 4 or 5 people helped me run this thing. We've done 5 or 6 small events, 2 of which have been poker events now, which have been our most successful events. And this will be our 3rd poker event. We're real excited about the Golden Nuggets jumped in and are helping us out, and we're attracting some pro players and some celebrity fighters and some other celebrities, and think it's going to be a lot of fun, and hopefully we'll raise a bunch more money that we can then give to some of these families and help some of these guys out.
You've got some information on the website that in Iraq and Afghanistan, 25,000 soldiers have been seriously wounded, and of those, something like 5,000 have suffered spinal cord injury or massive brain injury. So that doesn't even include all the amputees and other serious injuries. So it's huge numbers that you're trying to
absolutely. There's
and those
a lot
guys
of guys
need help
coming back that need our support, and just in raising the awareness so that people realize what's going on, because the government does a pretty fair job of blacking out the exposure of those guys.
They don't want
some for their privacy, which I understand, and some because of the media frenzy that it would create if people knew
the
everything
bad public
going
relations
on.
aspect, of course.
So we want to raise awareness, and I think our country has embraced most of those soldiers. We see it all the time now. Guys in uniform are getting a big hug or getting a big handshake for what they do for us.
It's just that people don't know how to help, and this is one way they can. People are sympathetic, but they just wonder, well, I've seen someone on TV, how do I help him, or how do I support him? And this is one of the organized ways to raise money and channel it to them. And you're doing direct. I mean, you raise money and you help people directly, right?
That's
individuals.
That's been our goal, to identify families through military commanders and others to directly, go through the hospitals and give this money directly to the families.
And then the week after, you're fighting Antonio Rodrigo Nogueira in your adopted hometown of Portland.
Yes.
That's exciting.
Yeah, very exciting to be back up in the Northwest and the first big UFC that's been there, and the people are coming out of the woodwork there for this fight. So it's going to be a lot of fun. I hope we blow the roof off the Rose Garden.
That's the Rose Garden, right? Paul Allen's arena.
Yeah.
That's awesome, Randy. It's been a pleasure having you in. We know you're busy, but we'll remind people again, August 22nd.
Operation All In.
And if people want to register or they want to play, what do they need to do?
They can go on to the extremecouturegifoundation.org, or they can go onto extremecouture.tv, and there's a link on there to the site as well to find out all the information, register, and come play with us on the 22nd. It's going to be a lot of fun.
We'll have some articles up on cardplayer.com too that'll have information, so hopefully a lot of people will turn out for it.
Yeah,
It'll be a great cause.
fun.
Great.
Fantastic. It's been a pleasure having you. Thanks a lot. Thanks for joining us on The Scoop, brought to you by Full Tilt Poker. Write to us at The Scoop at cardplayer.com.
I've seen just about everything. Seen queens overthrow kings, and straights flushed away. I felt the sweat after every re-raise, and nearly buckled after bad beats. Seen rags lead to riches, and witnessed countless miracles on the river. So if you want to play, take a seat and show me something I haven't seen. We play at fulltiltpoker.com.